14-year NBA veteran, one of our favorites from Turner Sports and The Ohio State University. Jim Jackson back here on the Rich Eisen Show. How you doing, Jim?
Awesome, brother. Enjoying a little time off, traveling a bunch.
Okay.
Keeping track of free agency, you know.
I got you.
Stuff. But what about you, man? How's things with you?
I'm just, working. I'm just working for a living. Did a little bit of traveling. My kids are all in camp right now. So my house is very quiet. It's very, very quiet. So things are going all right. Thank you for asking. Not many guests ask that of me, by the way. I got to be honest with you, Jim. You're a very caring man. I greatly appreciate that.
I am.
Thank you.
Got good parenting, bro. It's the Ohio in me, man. The Midwest. Midwest.
Okay. Did Michigan ever come knock on your door to play?
Yeah, oh, yeah. Bill Frieder was the coach then at the time.
Okay. And?
Actually, I took an unofficial. And Toledo is right there. I'm actually closer to Ann Arbor, 45 minutes.
Were you born in the same hospital as Harbaugh from Toledo?
And Trussell.
That's right. Right there. Okay.
Yeah, Mercy Hospital.
Okay.
Right downtown.
Okay.
So you know what's funny, Rich, is that a big bulk of my high school, I would spend a lot of time playing actually pickup ball in Detroit in the summertime.
Mm-hmm.
Now I couldn't play in the famous St. Cecilia because at the time in high school in Ohio, if you played in that league, you would be ineligible to play high school basketball. So, but it was some other leagues like Belmont and Sandy Sanders and other places, River Rouge, that I played through high school a bunch because it was just an easier track and you had a higher level of competition too there in the Detroit area.
So if you went to Michigan, would you have won a championship with Glenn Rice and if you had chosen Michigan?
No, I came in that next year.
Okay.
I came in the next year.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm always like a year late.
Come on now. No. So wait a minute. So were you on like a recruiting visit the year that Frieder was in his last year and left for Arizona State, and then Steve Fisher came in? Were you on? Was that when you were coming through?
Actually, I never took an official visit.
Okay.
Just unofficial visits, I would go. Never took an official.
Okay.
My only two official visits really were Ohio State, and then Kenny Anderson and I were going to go to Syracuse together. We took our visit together. And my host at the time was D.C. Derrick because I knew him, from Detroit. But I got up to Syracuse. Listen, man, it's way too cold up here. They brought us there at the wrong time, bro.
That's a fair
Bad
point.
Recruiting strategy. Bring us there in like November, whatever.
Well, by the way, Chris Brockman, my colleague here, is a Syracuse guy, and you are freaking him out right now. Not going to lie.
But the dome, Jim. We had the dome.
Yeah. Well, you see, it's funny. So back then, we had the rotary phone. Okay. So
yes.
Kenny called me, Anderson. He was number one player in the country. I was like around number two. He hit me and said, I was going to let you know I'm going to Georgia Tech. I was like, what? Because Georgia Tech never came up in the conversation about. We were talking about Georgetown, North Carolina, and Syracuse. Syracuse being the first one.
Yeah.
And Georgia Tech never was in the conversation. Then he hit me with that. He said, my mom's wants me to go. She loves Kremen. I'm like, man, all right, man, whatever, man. Okay. So that's how it went down.
And that's how it went down. I remember Bobby Crimmins with that bowl cut, that gray-haired bowl cut. I remember that.
Got a lot of guys out of New York because of his connection.
Well, I mean, he's a New Yorker, right? He had that thick accent, Bobby Crimmins, back in the day. Oh, man. I love this conversation. Jim Jackson here. A lot of what ifs right here on the Rich Eisen Show. Let's hit it. We're
okay.
Last night at the ESPYs, LeBron's like, I'm coming back. I was like, okay, I didn't think you were leaving. Did you? Was that an announcement that you thought was necessary to announce or anything like that? I don't know, Jim. Right?
It's hard for me to dig into. I've learned. Rich, how old are you?
I'm 54, so I'm 2 years older than you.
So,
yeah.
So we've learned a long time ago and lived long enough that you can't dive into people's minds, try to understand what they're thinking and why they do stuff.
Right.
What you do is kind of react to the message they send or what they're doing. So I tend to stay away because I don't know emotionally what a person is going through at the end of the season or family-wise or this or that, and to try to implement or input my thought process into what they're doing and how I would think. It just doesn't work because it's just too many different factors. But LeBron is like that in regards to making statements. It's the ESPYs. Everybody's tuning in, so the statement comes when it's the ESPYs. You shouldn't be surprised at that. I mean, that's LeBron, right, wrong, or indifferent. He's always chosen specific times to drop the bomb or whatever it may be, or a message, when the ears and eyes are on not just basketball but sports in general.
So yeah, I mean, and I'm with you too. It's kind of like it just comes with the meal, right? Like that sort of moment with LeBron, because the way that he played and the way that the team overperformed, based on expectations, and the way that the team was brought back and during free agency and also enhanced. I love the Gabe Vincent signing. I was like, LeBron's definitely coming back, the way that the free agency went down. So when he said last night, I'm not going anywhere, I ain't leaving, he pulled a little Wolf of Wall Street. I didn't bat an eye. I was like, oh, really? I didn't know that was a necessary announcement. That's the way I took it.
You know what, though? It was interesting. If you listen to that conversation, he said, for the last couple of years, he'd been thinking about this. Could he give – he didn't want to cheat the game, basically what he was saying. Well, he has it. I mean, he's cheated Father Time more than anything else in regards to him still being able to perform at a high level. Now, it's not LeBron James, of course, of the Detroit series, what was that, back in 2003 or 4, whatever it was, or 5, when he scored 25 points in the fourth quarter, all of that. But he's matured enough and the game has evolved enough that still allows him to be effective when he's not as athletic. But because what he has in between his ears and how the team is built, he's still, a dominant player. May not be every night, but when you need him to impact the game, he's there. So it was interesting when he talked about the last couple of years about him and how much is that to not being as successful post the bubble, of not winning. How does that strain on a highly successful, probably one of the greatest players ever played the game, mind? But I couldn't see him not coming back and vying for another opportunity with the changes they made and the additions they made to, vie for championship.
Jim Jackson here on the Rich Eisen Show. What do you think's going through Lillard's mind right now, Jim?
Listen, I've been around this game enough to know that they were playing dodgeball a little bit. Portland didn't want to seem like they wanted to trade him and push him out. Dame didn't want to ask for a trade, but it got to a point where somebody had to make a move because I don't think neither one wanted to be the bad guy in the situation. Mm-hmm. That's it. They're the ones that forced the breakup. But at some point, and it's tough too because you got to think about it. Dame talked about it before, and sometimes you got to be careful what you say. And I'm not saying that it's wrong, but about joining another superstar, about joining a team. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. I know that's probably not what he wanted to do, but ultimately, Portland is kind of stuck in this rut where they're good, but they're not great. They're not going to compete. You're not going to be able to get that big-time free agent to go there to aid Dame. When they were in the Western Conference Finals, that was their best shot. So they're at the point now where both sides have to feel they have to win. Now, how that is accomplished is going to be the interesting part because as much as you love Dame, if you're Portland, I'm thinking about it from a management perspective. You just can't give him away. It just doesn't happen like that in this league. Yes, we're committed to helping you to reach your ultimate goal with a championship, but we're not going to be naive and stupid and just give you away for nothing. And Dame has to understand that as well, is that at the end of the day, as a business, we know where you want to go, preferably, but it has to be a deal that makes sense for us, not just today, but as we head into the future and our rebuild with our young guys.
So do you think Adebayo's name has to be thrown in this mix here? Because that's...
There's no way they're trading that. Because then that defeats the purpose. Because now your championship aspirations for Miami go out the window without Bam. Now, in the interesting part, you hear Tyler's name being tossed around. I think it has to be another team involved. I don't know if Tyler, because of the depth at the wing position Portland has, makes sense for them. Now you have to bring a third team in that makes this whole thing, I think, maybe work. can you get off of Kyle Lowry's number and move that as well?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as simple as, just move this part. It's a little bit more complicated, but we've seen tougher deals get done in this league.
Right. And because that, Bam is a guy who I think Lillard has identified as someone he wants to play with. That's part of the mix of him wanting to go to Miami and the way that I guess that their program is run and the way that, South Beach is a nice place to live and, there's no state tax and whatever. I think that's part of the equation here. And then, of course, when you got a third or fourth team in, they're like, what do I, why do I need to help out Portland get out of their problem? Because it just seems to me, do you think it's possible? And I know that we're talking in the middle of July that Dame is still in Portland when training camp hits, and he's going to have to be the good citizen.
You can still trade him at the deadline. You know what I mean? Once the season starts, because I just don't think Portland is going to just give in and give up without getting something that's going to benefit them. Now, again, is it always an even trade? No. One side may feel a little bit better than the other, but do you feel good about what you got is the question. Did you give up the house now to go from a house to maybe a little smaller house instead of going to a condo or to a one-bedroom? I mean, that's a big difference there. You can go from a 5-bedroom to a 4-bedroom and still feel comfortable. All right? That's the difference. Going from a 5 to 1, that's a whole different story. And I think teams evaluate it that way. It's like if we can't get our best offers and deal done now, are we going to be able to leverage that and get a better one later on? Maybe you don't have the leverage as much, knowing that the trade has to happen come trade deadline in February. You know what I mean? So these are the questions that management poses when you put that on the whiteboard on short-term, long-term. How do we attack this? When do we have our best leverage opportunity, which is probably now compared to during the season, unless something drastically changes with some other teams that have to move some parts.
Now, obviously, Jim Jackson here on the Rich Eisen Show. Lillard hasn't popped yet, and nor is Harden. We're assuming he's going to maybe wind up here in Los Angeles. So let's do this. Let's put Lillard in Miami. We don't know how different Miami looks with that. And let's put Harden in Los Angeles with the Clippers, and we don't know how different Los Angeles or Philadelphia would look on that point of view. Have we appreciably changed anything of the pecking order in this league coming off of last season? Has anybody in your mind, maybe it's the Celtics with what they did with Porzingis, Beal with the Suns, have we rearranged anything significantly enough that the Nuggets aren't still the best team? What do you got for me on that front?
No, I think they're still the best team, but, it's a battle of attrition, too. When the moves are going to be made during the season, as you saw with the Lakers, that improved their situation tremendously. Injuries play a key role, but I think it's going to take a little bit of time for Phoenix to figure some things out because they're top-heavy, they're top 4, 5 guys at the beginning. Mm-hmm. But then again, their depth was an issue last year, and Ayton's mindset is going to be very important to what Phoenix ultimately does, because you're down the pecking order a little bit more now with a scoring guy like Bradley Beal. I think in the East, Boston was always. I mean, they had some things to match up wise against Miami that didn't go right, but to me, they were always still my favorite, just because of the makeup of the team. And it was a tough situation on Joe Mazzulla and everybody with the change in coaching and all of that last year that they had to deal with. But Philly, you think about it, they don't have James, and if they do, they take a step back, depending on what they get back in return. Because they were already in a situation, Rich, when you watch Philadelphia play, mm-hmm. they needed things to actually go right for them in regards to they needed James to play well, they needed Maxey to play well, they needed Embiid, they needed Tobias. They needed these guys. They didn't have a lot of reprieve because the depth-wise of guys that can really have an impact just wasn't there. And you lose a James Harden, despite him maybe not being the Harden of Houston, he still had an impact on the game. So I don't think it changes the pecking order outside of Philly, depending on what they get back. That drops them back.
It drops them back, huh? So What is your take on Harden? Just give all what I'm asking. You're all in one. Like, what's your take on him? Like, is he? He's a value add. The question is he a value minus when push comes to shove? What do you got for me on that, Jim?
My thing is I don't think he affects the winning aspect as the other dominant players do. Can he? But I will say this about James Harden. I will give him a lot of credit from this perspective. You know what you're getting with James Harden, especially when he came to Brooklyn. He was a scoring machine. How much is that going to relate to winning basketball games when it counts? He hadn't been able to prove it. But the mindset for him to go into Brooklyn and say, you know what, I'm going to play point guard and not worry about the other things. I do want to win. That told me a lot about him as a person. Okay, to be able to make that change when you're at the top of your game, accept the criticism that came with it by maybe not playing the way that we're accustomed to seeing him play, carry that to Philly as well. Now, again, he's not the same as far as quickness. He can't get by guys. But his effectiveness to set players up, it showed me a little insight into his maturity as a player that I don't think he can be your top guy. But if his mindset is right, he can still give you enough where he's a threat on the court with two other players that give you a viable option to win. He can't be the main guy, of course, we know that. But I will say that I've learned a lot over the last 2 or 3 years about him as a individual by taking the stance that he took in regards to his new role as more of a playmaker than a scorer.
Last one for you, Jim Jackson, is what did you learn about Victor Wembanyama over 2 summer league games? Now, it was kind of like the NFL in a way that just overreaction based on one game, and maybe an overreaction based on another, and an overreaction based on, Britney Spears approaching him. Honestly, it was a wild, 5-day stint for him in his first dipping of a toe in the NBA waters. Anything that comes out of that, though, that you think can inform us about Wembanyama at all? Jim?
Well, two things. What an outstanding job over the last 7, 8, 9 years the NBA has done with the Summer League to make it relevant. Okay, to make it this interesting in the summertime. We know it's a dead period. Football is about to start, but the NBA owns that part of it. So give them a lot of credit because we're talking about NBA basketball right now.
Yeah.
The season will start to October. In regards to Wembanyama, this is what I say. Some of it. His trajectory is going to be determined by what happens in San Antonio because they signed Pop 5 more years. So he's going to learn how to play the game. I think Scoot Henderson in Portland maybe will have more opportunities to go out and get numbers early because the ball is going to be in his hand. He's going to be, the expectations are not as heavy on him as it is in San Antonio. I think there's a step-by-step process with Wembanyama and what he has to do. Unlike Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan had David Robinson. So he had a buffer there to kind of learn it, whatever it is, in regards to maturity of the game and how to play. He's a mature young man. Pop and R.C. Buford will figure out ways to teach him how to play in the NBA, build up his body enough, his mind, the mental aspect that he can be effective. He may have some highs and lows during the course of the season early on. Remember Luka, I'm not going to say struggled, but had to figure some things out the first half of the season. And then that second half, once the light clicked, it was like, oh, okay, now we see Luka. And I can see that with Wembanyama is that he has to figure out what his game and how that translates not only to the NBA but within the San Antonio system with his players. And once that light turns over, whenever that is, we're going to see something special. But it's going to be a learning process, I think, for him. Along with San Antonio.
Jim Jackson, greatly appreciate the time. Enjoy your summer. Look for more of my calls, and I'd love to get you in here in person next time you're in town. Let me know. Please do.
Got it, brother. Appreciate it.
Thanks
Have
again.
a great rest of the week.
Right back at you. That's Jim Jackson. Always great chatting with him. 14-year NBA veteran doing a great job on Turner Sports. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.